Okay, so where were we? We said that what else could we do in the short run? We could work less, and maybe that would make us happier through more leisure and give us a better environment. Okay, even though the environmental effects aren't as big, it's far more important to get these policies in place. Okay, we should do both, right? But still, it might help the environment if we work less and make us happier. So that could be like a win-win. That's the theory. What does the data say about work hours? And what should we expect? What would theory say? So here's some data on work hours. I'm looking now closely at these, and I'm not so happy with these. But basically, these data points, they are starting around about the 1950s. And this is a log scale. So what this means is that a straight line is a constant rate of decrease in working hours. Okay, so what do we see? We see that from the 1950s to somewhere around the 1970s, 80s, 90s, 2000 for Germany, France, work hours are decreasing pretty steadily. But at some point, pretty early in the US, a long time ago, like 50 years ago, work hours have leveled off. In the UK, sometime in the 90s, I think. I wish I had dates on some of these dots. In France and Germany much more recently. But this long run decline, and if we had data going even further back, that decline, you'd see that decline carrying from 1870 through to 1950, 1970, 1990, for 100 years. So basically, in the 1800s, we worked like crazy, right? Most people, just to get food on the table for their kids. Then as we get richer, we want both more leisure. I'm trying to get my thumb onto the camera here. We want both more leisure and more consumption. So we work less, but not so much less. So we have more consumption per person and more leisure per person. But somewhere in the last 20 to 50 years, that increase in leisure has stopped. Okay, that's what the data is saying in the richest countries. This is so-called cross-sectional data for hours per adult for loads of countries, divided in order of labor productivity. So in low productivity countries, hours are very high per adult. In the high productivity countries, they're a lot lower, but again, we see that the trend levels off. Okay, a constant trend. If we take this, it would carry on like this, yeah. Again, on a log scale, that would be a straight line, so we'd be going like this. But instead, we see this leveling off. This one is interesting. This is for a typical low-wage earner and a typical high-wage earner within the same country. In low-income countries, high-wage earners work less. Okay, so this is the same story as here. It's like if you are on low wages, you work like crazy to get enough food and stuff for your family. If you've got a much higher wage per hour, it's like, oh, phew, I don't need to work quite so hard. But here are the richest countries. Here, the richest people, the people with the highest hourly wages, tend to work at least as much, if not more, than people with lower wages. So all of this is suggestive that there is, when you're poor, you work to get food on the table. When you're rich, you work for status. And when the status motivation is key, the link between income and increasing leisure is no longer holds. Because as everyone gets higher income, the status competition remains the same. Okay. So the data does, to some extent, support this idea. Okay. And this is the argument. Okay. I've just made the argument for this. Why might concerns related to status become more salient as income rises? Okay. So the policy conclusion might be that actually, if people are just in the status game, we should discourage them from working, and that would make them both happier and improve the environment. Okay. But would it? Okay. Would it? It's not obvious, right? Because if we take Sweden, I think it's fair to say that we're on some kind of trajectory like this, right? Environmental quality in Sweden overall is improving, and we are doing more and more in terms of air quality and so on. It's totally indisputable, right? It's gone up a lot. Even in terms of looking after biodiversity and so on, we're gradually doing more. Okay. So if you buy that we're on this upward trajectory, and then if you say, oh, the government introduced policies to cut our income, that's like moving the PPF to discourage us from working. That's like moving the PPFs backwards, inwards. If we're on this kind of trajectory, that's going to make environmental quality worse. Okay, all else equal. Because we get poorer, and then it's like, oh, now we can't afford, or our preferences are such that when our incomes are now lower, we're not as prepared to offer as much for the environment. Okay, so potentially, if underlying preferences stay the same, but the government discourages us from working, we might then choose policies which make environmental quality worse. Okay, so instead of moving along a line like this, we might move more like this, yeah. Or especially if we're like out here somewhere, because then the potential to go in the wrong direction is much greater. Okay. Okay. So if status concerns drive us to work too hard, that's probably not actually a huge issue for sustainability. And it's probably not a great idea to just sort of discourage us from working. Okay. So is that the end of the story? It's like Jackson's ideas, don't worry about them. Actually, it's good that we're working too hard. It makes us richer, and that makes us care more about the environment. Clearly, that's not the end of the story. What if, let me see, yeah, I'm still doing well for time. What if our efforts to cement our identities and gain status among our chosen peers cause us to choose pollution-intensive consumption patterns? Okay, so basically, status is about a lot more than just how much do I earn, how much do I consume, right? Again, if we go back 100 years, life was more about getting food on the table for your family. Okay, of course, your identity and so on was important then as well, but there wasn't, yeah, it's different today. Okay. Today, we choose our consumption patterns, we choose our careers, etc., based on the identity we want to create for ourselves. Okay. And if we choosing identities which lead to consumption patterns that are pollution intensive, that is highly problematic, right? And potentially, So we have a problem, but we also have a potential solution. What do I mean by that? So I'm going to explain that by a few examples, and then that's the end, I think, of the videos. So imagine that, well, we know that entrecôte, the sort of choice cut of beef, is super expensive. And people buy that. So conventional theory, economic theory, tells us that means we, in general, get a lot of utility from beef, and especially entrecôte, full stop. Okay, so does that mean that if I choose to become a vegetarian or a vegan and eat like lentil curry instead of entrecôte every evening, do I lose loads of utility? That would be super weird, right? I don't think I'm vegetarian. I was vegan for a long time. I don't think I lost any utility through that. I don't think I lost any utility from not eating entrecôte. Okay. And I'm not sure anyone, I don't think many people would claim that I do, right? So what am I really doing there? I'm choosing an identity, right? My consumption pattern, especially some areas, including food, what you choose to consume is a big part of your identity, right? It's like the wine bath, or, how fun is it to drink fancy wines all on your own? Not a lot, right? It's a social activity. Lots of young adult Swedes, I don't have any data on this, fly often to Manchester, staying for one night. Is this about absolute utility or building identity? I'm going to leave it to you to work out what I'm thinking of. Why are they going off to Manchester at weekends? And of course, my claim is that this is about identity building, taking part in your activity, being a full member of your peer group, coming home and telling your peers what you did at the weekend and talking about it and how fantastic it was. So middle-aged Swedes, they might fly to London staying for one night. Again, I'll leave it to you at the weekends. I'll leave it to you to work out what I think they're doing in London. I'm thinking of sister-in-law. What's she doing when she jets off to London with her daughter from time to time? What do you think? And is that part of identity building? I think it is. Lots of, senior people in the university, they might fly off to Spain, staying for everything from long weekends to several weeks in the summer. What are they doing? Why is that? Is that about identity building, or is it about absolute utility? So our chosen identity and the peer group that goes with it affects our consumption patterns. And of course, that is both a problem and an opportunity, because if, like, flying, say, gave us intrinsic utility, and if entrecôte gave us like intrinsic utility, then there would always be a sacrifice in not eating entrecôte and in not flying. But if actually the utility we get from flying to Manchester or eating entrecôte is contingent on the approval of our peers and that activity playing into our role and our identity, then that's much more flexible, right? Over time, the attitudes change and behavior can change without any loss of utility. Okay, so this is actually a very optimistic story. On the other hand, there's also this problem that once we've chosen a peer group for whatever reason, that then affects our attitude to information about climate change, about environmental damage, and it affects our preferences for policy, and it may make us, if we choose or end up in, for whatever reason, a peer group that loves flying to Manchester or whatever, then we might become resistant to information about what damage this is causing, and that may make the processes of change very difficult. Okay. Super interesting stuff, I think. Okay, I hope you found it interesting. I've got to do the assignments. I've got to work out exactly what I want you to do for that. I haven't talked about the Hickel paper, which is in the literature list. But I hope if you read that, it's very short, easy to read. You can relate it to what I've been talking about. And like I said, I haven't worked out the assignment yet, but it may be about relating this to what we've been talking about in these videos, or what I've been talking about. Okay, that's me for this topic. Look forward to discussing on Monday.